Welcome to the third program in our series of for Fitness Plus, M45 Plus series. We covered in the last two programs, we talked about mindset, talked about our feelings, our emotions, and how we should be thinking positively. And in our second part, we talked about movement, i.e. the physical activity and how we exercise, what we need to do with our bodies to keep moving. Now we're moving on to what I call M in our meal plans. And the meal plans, we're going to today talk about food and the different nutrients. And I hope you will join me today in a very colourful experience in the different diets that we can do. Right, so today we're talking about meal plans, and it's important to understand what our basic nutrients are, the macronutrients and micronutrients. We have four main areas. So we talk about protein, talk about carbohydrates, talk about fats, and we talk about water, which also is a very important part of our nutrition. So what do we talk about in proteins? Proteins is important for muscle building. We need to fuel our body with the correct food. Protein helps to rebuild, it helps to it helps the muscles and actually improve the functions of our muscles. So what are the sort of foods that we would talk about? When we go past our lovely canteen at the university, we can go through a little bit more. We'll talk about carbohydrates as well. We'll mention about complex carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates, and particular foods which are important for us and how they are important for our body nutrition and what we would need, what the compositions are. Fat and the importance of fat in our diet are key to the structure of the cells, key to structure of protecting our heart, protecting internal organs in our body, and particularly the brain. Fat, as we know, is important, but we have to be careful what type of fat we use. And one of the key things is water. Water is very important for us, and how much intake we have of water on a daily basis to rehydrate our body, to keep our cells very well hydrated, is key to our overall nutrition. ये जो हम use करते हैं calories का ये है, this is the energy, unit of energy in our nutrition. Proteins contain about 4 calories per gram, and protein sources होते हैं from animal protein or plant protein. And हम आज बात करेंगे कि किस चीज़ को हम involve करना चाहिए proteins का. The proteins help to build our muscles. It's key to the way we function. And we have the other main nutrient is carbohydrates. Again, about 4 calories per gram in our body, and we can actually use that to see how we actually function on a daily basis. We're going to go through some foods, and the foods that we have as we available, we have pasta. Pasta is a very good source of complex carbohydrate. It's good for sources for our sugar in the body. And as well as that, we've obviously got some fiber. We've got tomatoes, got cucumbers, we have mango, we have apricot, and in season at the moment is apricot, and it's a great source of sugar and fiber. What are the sort of foods that we should try to avoid in our diet? And I think what's important is to look at the processed food. If it's not something that your grandmother would recognize or your dada would recognize and you would get from original source, I would stay away from it. We need to look at natural foods, where it's grown, how it's grown, and do as much organic food as possible. So protein sources. Protein sources are in meat, fish, and plant sources. So dal is a great source, lentils, beans, an amazing source of protein and fiber for our diet. Now fat. Why fat? Fat is key to our health as well. but fat contains about 9 calories per gram. So the type of fat that we use is important. We should try to avoid too much saturated fats. We should try to avoid all the margarines, the butters that we have, but go for natural sources of fats, such as olive oil. And having a bit of olive oil on top of your salads is important. The other thing I've noticed in a lot of our food is mayonnaise. Where is mayonnaise come from? What is the source of mayonnaise? Mayonnaise, unfortunately, is a processed source of food, and we should try to avoid mayonnaise. And ketchup is another favorite I find here in Pakistan. We should try to avoid ketchup in our diet as much as possible as well. But look at our natural sources. Avoid sugars. Anything that contains extra sugars, we should try to avoid in our diet as well. But one of the key factors, which we're not producing today, but in our sources, we have barbecue. Barbecue, meat, chicken, lamb, goat. These are all good sources of protein in our diet. Minimum fat content, minimum extra oil that we have, but a great source for our bodies. Now, one of the things, this is another example of ice cream. Right? Tastes lovely, tastes great, but what is it? It's just high levels of sugar, and we should try to avoid these processed sugars as much as possible and stick to the natural sources of sugars, which we're going to talk about next. And this is the good thing, always try to eat what is in season. So we are in the season of mangoes, one of our best sources of sugar and fiber. We have the peaches and we have apples as well. One of the things we don't have is oranges, which is not quite in season, but great source of vitamins in all these foods. But also be careful about how much fruit that we have, because it does contain carbohydrate, it has sugars, but it is a natural form of sugar, but it can actually convert to obtaining fat in our body. So keeping the amount of sugar that we have from the fruit sources, but it's a great source of fiber. So always have it with the skin, like the apricots and the peaches and the apples. Have with the skin, which is a good source of fiber for our body. But try to have smoothies. Try not to add extra sugar in your juices. And that's a very source. And we forgot about mangoes. Bananas. We have the bananas. Bananas is a very good source of fiber for energy, especially if you're doing a lot of exercise. It's a good source that maintains energy in our body as well. So हमने बात की थी कौन से foods avoid करना चाहिए. And one of the big thing is it talked about processed food. White flour, white rice, anything made from white flour and products we should try to avoid. We need to sort of replace that with whole wheat and high fiber flour. And as you said, there's a good source of white flour and carbohydrates is our samosas. Our favorite samosas during Ramadan, amazing foods, great for iftar, but unfortunately it is not our best food for our bodies, unfortunately. But we can make them a healthy option. We can make our samosas in whole wheat flour. So here we have examples of that. We have chips and fries, white potatoes. Again, we should try to minimize the amount of carbohydrates that we have and sugar in our body, and so minimize that. But we do have source of salads. We have cucumbers, we have carrots, we have cabbage in that, and we have a great source of protein and fiber is chana. I think that's an amazing food for us. Chana contains good sources of fiber and protein, and it's a good replacement for animal protein if you're not into animal. But plant-based nutrition, vegan diets are becoming more and more popular, and I think for our health is definitely a good source. These are preparations for potatoes, the white potatoes in heavily fried oil. Occasionally is fine, but again we should try to minimize that in our meal plans. But overall, the key thing is we need to avoid calorie counting in the way we actually maintain our diet. We forget about willpower, just go into natural, healthy diet plans, and actually we can actually do something regular rather than think, oh, we have to achieve certain calories or we have to do certain things. But it's good habits, create those habits, consistency in those habits. We should have a third of our plate in protein, a third of it in complex carbohydrate, and a third in dietary carbohydrate. With all of this in mind, we should maintain our diet with a third and a third on our plate and try to minimize the amount of unhealthy carbohydrates and fats in our diet. So, हमने बात की थी different foods के बारे, तो क्या हम moving forward क्या करना चाहिए? दो चीज़ें मैं कहता हूँ, key points आप ये learn कर सकते हैं. एक, forget the willpower, भूल जाएं जो हम सोचते हैं हमारा दिल करता है वो करने का. मैं तो कहता हूँ कि आप healthy habits वो create करें. Eating good healthy habits, creating healthy habits for your day-to-day life is the key. Set aside time, set aside good meals for yourself. And the other thing is, सब लोग बोलते हैं कि हमारी कैलोरीज़ का ये काउंट करना चाहिए, ये इंग्रेडिएंट्स देखना चाहिए, ये हम डब्बे के ये पढ़ते हैं कि इतने कैलोरीज़ हैं, इतने कैलोरी. मैं कहता हूँ कि ये सब भूल जाएं. Forget counting calories. वो आपके लिए ज़्यादा तकलीफ़ देगी. It actually makes life more difficult because you have to count calories. Yes, you may have an app, you may be able to do this digitally, lekin I say avoid calorie counting and stick to basic habits, stick to a regular, consistent diet. Each diet should have a third of protein. Think about your plate, divide it into three. A third of protein, a third of complex carbohydrates such as broccoli, spinach, cauliflower. Use these as your complex carbohydrates, and even what is great is sweet potatoes. Avoid the white potatoes, get some lovely sweet potatoes, and that's a good source of complex carbohydrates. And the third part is use fibrous carbohydrate. Already mentioned, anything green, anything fibrous contains lots of good energy, particularly fiber. This is the key. क्या करना चाहिए और क्या हमारी हेल्थ को इम्प्रूव करना चाहिए. अगर आप वेट लूज़ करना चाहते हैं या आप अपनी हेल्थ के लिए, आपके हेल्थ हार्ट डिज़ीज़ के लिए या डायबिटीज़ के लिए, ये नहीं है कि आप सिर्फ वेट लूज़ करना चाहिए. आपको आपका हेल्थ के लिए देखना है. हमारा बेसिक कॉन्सेप्ट है हेल्थ एंड फिटनेस के लिए इज़ बी कंसिस्टेंट. रेगुलरली करें ये चीज़ें, कंटिन्यूसली करें. आप रेगुलर अपने ईटिंग हैबिट्स रखें. कुछ 5-6 बार आप स्मॉल मील्स खाएं दिन में, इससे फ़ायदा होगा. इंशाल्लाह ये सब चीज़ें करने से आपके अपनी फैमिली के लिए, आप टीच करें अपने बच्चों के लिए, अपने एल्डर्स के लिए और अपने घर वालों के लिए. आप रेगुलरली करेंगे, आप कंसिस्टेंट रहे और try to achieve something that is maintaining for long term, not just a short term. And I hope that with this today's program we've been able to help you a little bit more. And if you have any further questions, please get in touch with me in Fitness Plus, and inshallah I'll be able to answer your questions from there.